Hello! If this is the first video of mine that you are watching, welcome to my channel, but if it is not, welcome back. Today I have set myself up back in front of the wall of books. Hopefully this will be the last time we have to contend with construction, but I hope you didn't mind the bloopers from the last video. I have made myself quite comfortable today. I have a little cat in my lap here who is behaving, so I'm gonna let him go back to sleep. And for the distilled beverage pairing for this video, I have made myself up a whiskey sour. Now this is a cocktail that I know I love, so it felt very appropriate to pair it with some of my most loved tropes. It was a toss-up between a whiskey sour or a dark and stormy, so there will be some rum-based cocktails coming soon. As you can tell by the nice foam on top there, I have made this one up with some egg white, and I have topped it with some bitters on top just for presentation's sake mostly, even though my presentation isn't the best in this glass. That is far too big for this cocktail. However, I know it's going to taste great, so cheers. I am going to be going over some of my most loved tropes today. I've jotted down 5, and I am aware that these fluctuate greatly and frequently, so there is a chance that by the time I come to even edit this video, I will have changed my mind. But as of right now, in this moment, these are some of my 5 favorite tropes. I have also tried to think of 1 or 2 or 3 book pairings for each trope so that I have some books to talk about today too. So without further ado, let's dive right into the tropes. I have tried to assign a number of sorts to these tropes so that I can talk about them in descending order. Therefore, number 5 for my favorite tropes is the quest trope, especially when it is paired with a ragtag group. And I think if you know how much of a fantasy fan that I am, the inclusion of this trope comes as no surprise because it is so often used in fantasy books. And for that reason, I have thought of 2 examples that I would like to talk about today. The first is one that I have discussed quite recently, and that is the Eisenhorn trilogy by Dan Abnett. This is a science fiction series, not a fantasy series. However, it does very much embody that quest trope with our group traversing the galaxy to root out chaos and find what they are looking for. As well, I don't have the first book here, but the very first book introduces how this random-ish group of people come to know one another and the bonds that are created between all of these characters. So I very much loved the crew that was acquired throughout the course of the first book and then stuck together throughout the remainder of the trilogy. So this series very perfectly embodies both the quest trope and the ragtag group trope, which is why I think I enjoyed this one so much. But if you are more a fan of fantasy books, I do have a adult fantasy standalone recommendation for you, and that is Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames, which is just such a fun fantasy by a Canadian author. It had some really emotional, evocative scenes, but also so many laugh out loud funny moments. It follows a band of retired mercenaries who have all gone their separate ways, but are then brought back together for one final quest, one final task. And the ensuing banter and adventure was just so much fun. It wasn't a perfect book by any means, but I still really enjoyed it. And I think Eames as an author took on a lot of the constructive criticism he received with his debut and then funneled that into the sequel of sorts, Bloody Rose, which I am so excited to read. And I think at its core, what I loved most about this book was just the themes of love and friendship, as well as the themes of a father's love for their daughter and just what they will do for that love. and that is go to the ends of the world for it. And it was just such a fun, emotional, entertaining read. Now, my fourth most loved trope is going to be when a stoic character shows emotion. And I think there are so many Tumblr and Twitter and text posts circulating on the internet that it is safe to say a lot of us love this trope, with good reason. But this was one of the hardest tropes to think of an example for, because every example I thought of felt a little bit like a spoiler, because I think that moment when a stoic character breaks, when they show a significant amount of emotion, whether that be anger or despair or sadness, that's such an important moment, and the shock of it has a lot to do with that moment because you don't expect that character to break. Therefore, I don't think I can tell you which character comes to mind when I think of this trope. But because I am who I am going to use this opportunity to recommend The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. This is an adult fantasy 14-book massive series, and the books are fairly chunky. So even though I know this is a massive endeavor to undertake, if you so choose to read it, I would be remiss not to recommend it, because there is a particular scene where you have a very stoic, calm, collected character lose it. Actually, in 14 books, I feel as if it happens a fair few times, but there is one specific example that I'm thinking of relatively early on. I'll leave it at that. Now, my third most favorite trope is going to be another slightly cliche one, but I will defend until my dying day that cliches are cliche for a reason. And the trope that I am talking about is when the grumpy one is soft for the sunshine one. I think this trope in particular has been all over the internet as of late because of Our Flag Means Death, that TV show, which is a great TV show and the absolute epitome of when the grumpy one is soft for the sunshine one, which is a trope that I enjoy so much in my romance. And if you know me, you know I really enjoy a historical romance. I find them to be a really good palate cleanser for all of the best reasons. So for this recommendation, I am going to be departing from my beloved fantasy genre and venturing into more romantic waters with Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare. I think with historical romances, and honestly why I find them so comforting a lot of the time, is that they are a little bit predictable. You know what's going to happen and you can just kind of go along for the ride and enjoy it. You don't have to think too hard, as harsh as that sounds. But there was a twist relatively early on in Romancing the Duke that just reminded me why I love Tessa Dare so much and how she can take that predictability and that familiarity of historical romance and put her own unique spin on it. So if you enjoy historical romances, definitely recommend checking out Tessa Dare. And if you love the grumpy one is soft for the sunshine trope, absolutely would recommend this read. I don't know why I thought this video would be a quick, short, snappy video to film when I'm talking about my favorite things to read, and of course I'm gonna waffle on and on and on about that, so I apologize. However, we are getting towards the end because my second most loved trope is going to be found family. I love this trope so much. I really cherish and appreciate platonic relationships and how important those can be in your life. So I love reading about that representation in literature. And the book that I am going to recommend today for this trope of found family is another one that I've talked about relatively recently, but that is The Lies of Locke, Lamora by Scott Lynch. Now, this is another adult fantasy series, and it is an unfinished series. So I will introduce it with that caveat. There are 3 books currently published of a planned 7-book series, and the 4th one should be coming within the next few years or so. I believe it is finished, and Lynch is working through some personal stuff in his life and getting it to the point, and getting himself to the point where he's ready to release it. But the Gentleman Bastard series is so good. We have, well, our main protagonist is an orphan, so he doesn't have any family to speak of. Therefore, his close friends absolutely become his family, but they also adopt him as one of their own, and again, will just go to the ends of the earth for one another. I love this series. I love these characters so much. I've seen this described as Robin Hood meets Ocean's 11 meets The Godfather almost, because it gets quite graphic with the betrayal and the consequences to actions. But I love it. It's so good and it's so entertaining. While it has those rip your heart out moments, it is also laced with such humor and good fun. But back to the trope that I am recommending this book for, the bonds and the connections between our characters are so good. Jean and Locke just fill me with the warm fuzzies, and I think it is such a realistic depiction of family and friendship, because they do not always see eye to eye, and they have their fights and they have their moments trying to hash things out. But at least so far, they always manage to come back together, even if it is a little bit hesitantly. They know that at the end of the day, they do want to be there and support the other, and that is what comes through. So I think this is a great example of found family. And finally, unless this is the first video of mine that you are watching, you can probably already guess what my favorite trope is going to be, and that is because I mention it in nearly every video. So of course, I am talking about enemies to lovers. I adore this trope. I know it is a bit cliche, and I know it is everywhere nowadays, but I still really enjoy this trope when it is done well. And it was such a struggle to try and think of examples for this trope, because I have just read so many books that feature this as part of the plot. I mean, in my last video alone, there were 2 out of 4 books that featured enemies to lovers. So I thought long and hard about this. I mean, I obviously considered Serpent and Dove, Red Queen, The Wrath and the Dawn, To Kill a Kingdom, Red, White, and Royal Blue. I could go on and on and on. But the book that I am going to mention today as my enemies to lovers recommendation is This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is a very slim novella that is in the form of letters being written back and forth between 2 enemies turned lovers, Red and Blue. It's a little bit confusing because you don't really get much world building. You have to glean the details yourself from these letters of what they're talking about, why they are on opposing sides of this time war. And honestly, the way I best enjoyed this book was by not focusing on those details. Instead, I focused on the interactions between these 2 characters and the slow burn love that they had for one another. I just loved it. I am someone who adores writing letters and sending cards to my friends and family, so the fact that this love blossomed in that format is something that really delighted me, and I think this is a great example of enemies to lovers. I would highly recommend this book if you do enjoy enemies to lovers and are looking to read a little bit more science fiction. So those were a few of my favorite tropes and a few book recommendations to go along with them. If you have any recommendations for the tropes that I mentioned, or any of your own favorite tropes that you would like to share, please let me know down in the comments below. I would love to hear them. But I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I will be back very soon with a new one. Bye for now.